Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Bengal Tiger Podcast. I'm Matthew Brune. Joining me once again is Shea Dixon. Shea, I think this is our first podcast since Billy is now a father, right?
Yes,
Congratulations to
baby
Billy.
Jack. For those not on the board, Billy is a father now. Mom's doing well, baby's doing well, and Billy's got a couple weeks off. So it'll be me and you rocking it. We'll get some recruiting pods in as well
Yes.
during this time. If you missed it, Billy had Cody Belair, one of our national On3 rankings analysts, on the last recruiting pod where they broke down the class and a lot of the current commits. So check that out. And then me and Maddie B will get y'all on some recruiting stuff. And Maddie B, we can do one where we mix in some basketball and on the men's and women's side, a little bit of everything going on right now.
Yeah.
But this is a football pod, so we'll stick there. And for the first time since they became coaches here at LSU in their current spots, we got to talk to OC Joe Sloan and DC Blake Baker this week. And they spoke to the media each for about 20 minutes. And nothing crazy, Maddie B, came out, any major revelations, but
Yeah.
they did shed light on how a lot of guys are doing, how things are coming along on the defensive side, which was a big question mark. And Sloan talked a lot about on offense, the continuity that they have of, yes, losing Denbrock, but keeping all the same other coaches and a quarterback in Nussmeier who has been the backup now for a few years. And we can start on that side. And I know everyone wants to hear about quarterback. Did you have any major takeaways from Sloan on quarterback? Because we're in a situation, which we're not often in, where it's an LSU offseason and there's no quarterback battle discussion. Like that's always the major offseason. Who's battling at quarterback? Even if you think this guy's going to win, does this guy have a shot? None of that's going on right now. So really it's been about growth, I guess, like taking that next step.
I think, yes, and the only competition right now is AJ Swan and Ricky Collins for the second spot, which, we watched practices. We've, watched the first 20 minutes here and there, and we see who goes second. Sometimes it's Ricky, sometimes it's AJ. I think those two are having very healthy competition to back up Garrett here. As far as Sloan goes, I didn't take anything we didn't really know already about Nussmeier. We know when he's on platform. We know when he has his feet under him. We know when he's decisive and not forcing throws, or at least not forcing bad throws into mistakes. He is an elite quarterback. And to hear Sloan, who's worked with him now for 3 years and just knows him top to bottom, to hear him talk about Nuss and his potential, along with very, bluntly kind of laying out where he needs to improve, I think that is good for fans to hear. And I think it's good for us to hear in terms of we know what Nussmeier is and we know where he needs to continue to grow over the coming months. But overall, there's nothing that he said that really shocked me. We know as a decision maker, that's going to be decide his season, right? Is he going to have 17 interceptions or is he going to have 8? Like that's going to decide how good Garrett Nussmeier is, because we know he's going to have the touchdowns. We know he's going to have the big plays. But ultimately the decision making and knowing when to try to force a pass into a tight slot is what Sloan is working with him on. I think it's really interesting to hear.
I think we've seen Sloan's quarterbacks minimize turnovers too.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, this Nussmeier isn't the same one that was going in against Southern or whatever it was, where he's just going to lob it backwards or out of bounds. And he knows they're up 70-0 and it doesn't matter. And the bowl game too. And that one, they were having to come back. So there were many opportunities where he could have gotten himself in trouble and didn't. He did throw one pick. But moving forward, I'm fine with him there. As for backup, I think he's going to have a good season. I think he will be developed. I think I don't think he's getting anywhere near 17 picks unless they're just having to throw every game. And we'll talk about that in a second and just the overall philosophy. Quickly, though, as for the backup, I think that if you're playing a game and Nussmeier gets banged up and he's going to be, it's the second quarter and he goes to the locker room and it's like, all right, they're going to figure it out and he'll come back out after half or they'll see how he is. I think Swan's going into the game. That's why you got him from Vanderbilt. He has double-digit starts. If there's struggles for him this spring, I would bet that's as much on just moving into a new system, right? Like Ricky Collins has been here for a year. Like is an expectation that from year one to year two, as he gets more reps, he can flash a little bit more.
Yeah.
While I'm not surprised that an AJ Swan would come in, and yes, he's got double digit starts, but this is his first time ever in this system with these guys learning their timing. So, but neither of those surprised me. Ricky getting kind of making flashes and then Swan taking a minute to get rolling. I think by fall camp, though, like that's why you got Swan. Like you need
Yeah.
someone who's actually been there before if you get into a tight spot.
Yeah. Um, and then he did mention Colin Hurley as well. He said that the accuracy is starting to come around and the arm talent is there, which we've known. So that's
And
going to be
remember,
his
what he got to
long.
campus, he was 16 years old. So I mean,
Yeah,
he's not only an early enrollee, he skipped a year, so
he's a
he is
young early enrollee. Yeah, which
still
is great.
still a very young kid, a lot of development to come. But that's the four quarterbacks. And again, without a debate as to who the starter is, not a lot to really go on there that's of much intrigue, at least in terms of maybe some other positions. I think maybe philosophy wise is where we go next, Matty B. I don't have the transcript in front of me, but Sloan said something basically to the effect of this is, and we got to talk about this from the inside out. And it's beginning with the O line. And really, we can sit here and talk all day about throwing it, and Nuss being great, and Kyron making this jump, and all these great receivers. But they want it's, I would bet that of that 20-minute press conference, more than half of it was spent talking about developing a run game that's
Yeah,
not led by the quarterback.
yeah. The run game, the offensive line. It's easy to, like you said, get enamored by, wow, who's going to be the starting receiving core, right? CJ Daniels, Xavier Thomas, Kyron Lacy, all these guys, Chris Hilton, who, he talked about. We'll talk about the receivers as well, but this offensive line is going to set the foundation for this team. And if you want to throw Mason Taylor in there, obviously, who can do both block and catch, I think he's going to be a huge part as well. But that front five, Joe Sloan just continued to hammer home, getting those guys more comfortable. And I think the way he worded it in the run game is they had a lot of these run concepts in last year, but they just didn't need to use them, right?
Yeah.
They were able to simplify the run game in a way to where when you have a running quarterback like Jaden Daniels, and the threat of him keeping it is so potent, like that holds linebackers, that holds safeties, that holds edges down, like in itself. Now you don't really have that threat as much. And so it's becoming, all right, how do we get Will Campbell and Emory Jones more into the run game in terms of pulling zone run stuff? Like, how do they do that? And that's what Sloan did a good job of, I think, giving really good insight, honestly, on throughout his press conference of, doing more in the run game and trying to fit all that in. Because when we were at practice, we saw it. We talked about it last podcast. It's like they ran the ball like 70% of their snaps. I think there's a real emphasis here to establish not only the running back or run game, but the offensive line creating new yards and what do they say? Creating a new line of scrimmage, right? Reestablishing themselves in that way. I think, yeah, Sloan was really, really big on that.
They've got a talented one in a sophomore, rising sophomore, in Caleb Jackson, who is a freshman. We saw in spots what he could do. He'll be the number one back, most likely. Josh Williams, a true veteran, three down back for him. So you've got that reliability piece that every running back room wants at the college level. And then with Trey Holly not currently with the team, the fourth guy being Caden Durham, comes here this summer. We've talked about it before. He is a 6 foot plus 200, what I think, oh man, I bet he's in the 210, if not more,
Yeah.
15 range. Right now he's running track and he's running sub 10 fives. So running back, you can play early there, even if it's like we saw with Caleb Jackson. If they're not going to rely on you to pass block, whatever, at least get in there and get some touches.
Yeah.
We'll see that from Durham. And we'll see if they get anyone out of the portal. But run game wise, I think that they've got talent in the room. And certainly I think we all feel like it's going to be led by, that Caleb Jackson and then Josh Williams combo.
Yeah. Anything from the receivers that stood out to you? I think,
Here, this is what I view receiver as. We talked about it a lot, and let's lump tight end into this.
yeah,
Mason Taylor as a tight end is going to be a massive part of this offense with Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. And as we talked about all last season, he didn't like he had that big freshman year, and then catch wise and all that, it was a down year because so often it was okay. I could throw it to Mason for these 5 or 6 yards, but I'm Jaden. I can run in 2 steps, get 6 yards.
Yeah.
So Mason's role wasn't as crucial. Now that you've got a guy like Nussmeier who's going to stand in the pocket, Mason had a big game against Wisconsin, and then Sloan talked about him a lot in the press conference. Brian Kelly talked about him a ton in his press conference. So very evident he's going to play a big role. And then even Sloan said, look, Kamorian Pimpton is here, Mac Markway. How do we get Pimpton more involved? Obviously, we've done it with Markway. So the tight ends are going to eat into these catches some.
Mm-hmm.
That sets up how I want to view this. If only 5 receivers caught a pass last year on LSU's team, and the tight end wasn't a major role, it has to be viewed through the lens of 2 guys ate up almost all of the actual production. And then Lacey, the third guy, ate up the rest of it. So like Chris Hilton got in there for some, and then Aaron
Yeah.
Anderson caught some passes. I think they go beyond 5 receivers catching a pass this year because I don't think it's going to be so dominated by 1 guy or 2 guys like it
Yeah.
was a year ago to the tune of more than 1,000 for each.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
let's
we've
just
seen.
call it 5, though. I don't care what position they play. I don't care if they're on the first, second team. How do I fill up that 5 right now? Let's play this exercise. There is no doubt in our mind that Kyron Lacey is being referred to by Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly as wide receiver 1. So your one returning guy is no doubt in that 5. I think that the next guy you have to put there is Chris Hilton, right? Like he has been running first team a lot and is getting talked up by the staff. And we know he's been here. Like, yes, CJ Daniels is a transfer and Xavier Thomas both come with experience and way more production. More production probably across time than Hilton. But Hilton's been here. And now that he's healthy, he's been a pretty consistent first teamer. I
Yeah.
think by season's end, he is 100% going to be, in my mind, in the top 3 to 4 receivers on the team. So I'm comfortably putting him in right now, that top 5 at number 2.
I think Lacey, Hilton, and Daniel. I can't put Hilton and Daniels. Order is still challenging to me because we haven't
And
seen
that's
the
fine.
offense.
We're just filling it up in order of confidence that by season's end, those
Yeah,
guys will
those
be in the top
3,
5.
Lacey, Daniels, Hilton are gonna be there. I think those
Okay.
3, like, again, barring injury, which knock on wood, you never wanna see, but, like, those 3 are locks. I think
So,
if we're talking yards or reception or maybe combination of both, I think Mason Taylor has to be in there.
yeah, and we're not counting tight ends. We're just counting
Okay, just
receivers to
receivers.
kind of give listeners a view of that because there's no doubt. I think you're right. Mason Taylor may be third in catches
Somewhere in there,
or,
yeah.
fourth or fifth in, yards, whatever it might be, or second in touchdowns,
So
who knows? But so let's keep it to we do think
so
tight ends
those
are going to
3
have a big impact.
receivers,
What receivers?
um,
And for the listeners, Kyron Lacey obviously was their third guy behind Malik and Brian Thomas. Now he's the vet and kind of leaned on, and Chris Hilton was someone who's battled injury every year and then finally was healthy last year, but playing behind the aforementioned, didn't get a ton of run. We saw him break out in the bowl game, though, but he's gotten a lot of first team reps. And then CJ Daniels is the Liberty transfer who at Liberty, which was a very good football team last year that made it into a New Year's Six Bowl. He was 1,000-yard receiver, double-digit touchdown catches. So he comes with an expectation of like, all right, you did that there, you should be able to produce here.
yeah. So then the next you have 2 slots basically for 4 players, I'll say. Xavier Thomas, Aaron Anderson, Shelton Sampson, Kyle Parker. Separating those 5 into 2 spots, I think is challenging, but I think Xavier has to be there.
I
I
agree.
think Brian Kelly talked about him. I think Joe Sloan talked about him. Like those Xavier is going to be a top 5 receiver for this team. Now it's how much do you trust Aaron Anderson to improve from what he was last year? Kyle Parker got some early first team reps. I don't think he'll be a first team receiver, but they're giving him a lot of reps. And then Sampson potentially has the highest upside of any of them if he puts it together. How do we decide between those 3 which one we're most confident in to be a top 5 receiver on this team? Whew.
It seems in spring ball that everyone I've spoken to, and then when they've spoken publicly, that Aaron Anderson's been healthy and
Yeah,
consistent.
yeah.
And I don't know how they view using what is the difference between how they would use Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas as a receiver?
I look at them very similar in terms of slot and guys who can do a lot when they get the ball in their hands. Like, I mean, they were both, punt returner types. Though, and just Sloan mentioned that, right? Sloan was like, we want to create punt return opportunities on offense with Xavier Thomas and Aaron Anderson. So he looks at them in a similar vein. So yeah, I do think like Aaron Anderson is getting first team run over Xavier right now. Like it's April 4th right now. So what does it matter? But so I do think it's safe to put Aaron Anderson in that top 5 conversation, especially when looking at just receptions. Like he could end the year with, 20 receptions for however
Yeah.
many
So these
yards.
guys could be both on the field and then getting rotated into similar roles where it's get them into space, get them the ball, see what
Exactly.
they can do.
Exactly.
And then, as you know, and look, Joe Sloan said Shelton Sampson, who would, the former 5-star, a freshman a year ago, all 4 of the freshman receivers took a red shirt, so none of them were really big impact nor needed to be. But we've seen Kyle Parker, one of those freshmen, take some big steps. And then he said Shelton's had a really strong week of practice or a couple of past practices. He said he's made some big plays. So I'm with you. I think that group of 4 there, beyond your top guys, and maybe some of them, one or two of them, Xavier Thomas and Aaron Anderson, moves himself up even further into the other group of the guys who we're talking about, like a Lacey and
Yeah.
a Hilton and
I think Parker could too. Parker could, I mean, certainly. There's so much uncertainty, and it's not a bad thing for this receiver room because there's talent. Um, Albeit, I don't think there's Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas at this moment on this roster as a receiver. But with the importance of the offensive line, I think I got the sense from Joe Sloan that it's like we're going to be able to plug in whoever we need depending on the situation a little bit, and that's a really really valuable thing to have when you don't
yeah.
have Malik Neighbors every year, which it's hard to have that. All right,
Bit
you
of a
ready?
rundown on the offense. They finished number 1 in total offense a year ago. That's not the expectation you can hold them to now, given they lose their, one of the
Yeah.
Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback and 2 receivers, one of which was the most successful receiver, Malik Neighbors, in LSU history, most receptions and yards receiving, and then Brian Thomas, who will also be a first-round pick. So congrats to all those guys. Draft coming up here in a couple of weeks. But we don't expect any major fall off on offense, but they certainly need to find a way to establish that run game.
Yep.
Um, we told we came on this saying, hey, let's do like a under 30-minute pod here and just give everybody a quick recap of hearing from both these coaches and our thoughts. And we're coming up on about the 18-minute mark, and we haven't touched on defense yet. And I know everyone
Let's do it.
is worried about the defense, and shouldn't that be the part you talk the most about? I feel like after listening to Blake Baker today, the message, if I were to relay what Blake said to fans, or you could just go watch it, it wasn't, but I'm just saying, if this were a private meeting and I met with Blake Baker and I walked away from his 20 minutes, my message to fans is don't set any crazy expectations. We're installing this new defense. We're going to coach these guys up. Right now, what I like is that they are showing me that they want to fight. They want to learn. Mistakes are getting made every day, and it's much of the same personnel as before. So we
Yeah.
can touch on some of the kind of things he talked about. He talked about Harold Perkins. He said it's by far the biggest question he gets anywhere he goes, how to use Harold Perkins. But more often than not, he was saying, hey, look, every day we're getting a little bit better. And do we know what that end result is? No, but the guys are buying in, and right now that's what we need.
Yeah, I think you laid it out well. It's the biggest takeaway is that this is a big learning curve, I think, for a lot of people in terms of install, in terms of just getting everybody comfortable. And I think he didn't say this, but this is a different mindset that this defense is going to have this year. And LSU fans talk about it all the time, right? You go from Matt House's defense, which was last year, maybe out of necessity, very soft, not super aggressive, uncertain in a lot of ways. This year, Blake Baker is trying to change that completely. You're trying to do a 180. You're trying to get your corners pressed up a lot more. You're trying to get your linebackers in a lot more attacking situations, the safeties, a guy like Major Burns at the star position, trying to make him aggressive as a nickel. This is a complete 180, and this is going to take more than just a spring to install. And we'll see how it looks in the fall. But at this moment, it's a lot of learning, a lot of teaching on the field. And in terms of like specific position units, I did think he said some good stuff about the cornerbacks and the secondary as a whole. He gave a good answer to kind of paraphrase it, saying that he feels like he has the guys in their natural positions now. And I feel like that was a direct reference to Major Burns, who is now at that star position where, he maybe wasn't comfortable at the
And
safety spot
Sage
at all,
at safety.
and Sage at safety. So you get those type of quotes in there to say, hey, we like this guy here, this guy here. I think that's all a part of the learning curve, and we're about we have one more week of spring ball before the spring game, so it's going to take a long time. But those were my two biggest things: is this is going to be a off-season long overhaul, and B, they're starting to put people in their position, in their natural positions in the secondary.
Yeah, and he said on Harold Perkins, which we know Perkins is going to play linebacker, and his freshman year he was that outside kind of stand-up edge rusher. And he said, "Look, Harold knows and has worked on linebacker. Like number one, let's start here. Your work on being a great linebacker, and you've made those strides. Okay, then we add this and add this, and he said by the season you'll see Harold. He'll be blitzing outside, inside. He'll have a lot of responsibilities because he's a great football player, but he was like, the goal this spring has just been to make sure he knows let's perfect the linebacker spot, and then we do it all from there. And remember, Blake Baker recruited Harold Perkins, so he's got a past with him while he was at LSU before leaving to Missouri for 2 years. He talked about Greg Penn at linebacker, a guy he coached at he was with him here, leaves for 2 years, comes back, talks about how much Penn's grown as a player, etc. I thought that it wasn't shocking anything about Harold. It and wasn't anything like he's not picked it up or we're having to move him again. It was everything's going as planned. He acknowledged, just like Brian Kelly, that the interior of the defensive line is a work in progress and that they've got to continue to add pieces, whether it be through the portal. As Brian Kelly said, he talked about getting guys here this summer will help, and really just bringing guys along every day. And he said Bo Davis has sort of been tasked with that as, hey, that's the daily mission of spring ball. And we knew that would be the case. They didn't have any interior linemen beyond Jacoby and Guillory that had ever played much. So, and Jalen Lee being the only other one coming back. He didn't dive a ton into the ends or the edge, jack linebackers,
No.
but I feel like we already know what we get there. We've seen all of those guys play last year, and we expect them to naturally progress some. So we know what's going on there. Safety all spring. Sage Ryan and Jordan Gilbert have been the two safeties. Both of them look locked into a job to me. That nickel spot looks like it belongs to Major Burns. Corner is where things are continuing to be intriguing. And as you noted, he seemed to think, he talked up PJ Woodland. He seemed to think there were some other guys out there who were competing, and we've seen a lot of rotating, whether it be Toviano, who was a high school safety that played corner a year ago as a true freshman and has still been there some. But you've got Jair. I've talked to a lot of people who say that Jair is also a guy that they really excels in blitzing. So like someone that you can move in, and then Blake Baker and Corey Raymond certainly have, they'll press you and play man, but they'll also send their corners. I think that the PJ Woodland as an early enrollee emergence here into at least giving him some first team reps to see how he does is intriguing, because as Blake Baker said, throw him out there a few times and put him against their number one receiver. The thing that stands out, look, does he win them all? No, of course not. But he's competing against Kyron Lacey or whomever that is. And you got to remember, PJ Woodland was Mississippi 7A Defensive Player of the Year. So I don't know that I'm buying into the offseason. I'm all, hype, which it's not hype at all. We're just talking through who's on roster. But I said this was a multi-year rebuild at corner when Brian Kelly got here. And 2 years in a row, they went so heavy on the portal that it just kept extending that conversation.
Yeah.
I think the optimism I have right now, Matty B, is that we're nearing the end of that conversation. With Corey Raymond back here, you got Jake Olson at safeties. They're going to put an emphasis on high school recruiting And now when we're looking around at who's going to play, whether it is a Jair Brown, who's only been in college, what, 2 years or 3 years,
Mhm. 2 years.
everyone else is younger than that. Stamps, Toviano, PJ Woodland's a freshman. I might be missing somebody obvious. Oh, they'll have Zy Alexander back at some point. He obviously is injured and is a veteran, but so many of these
Jeremiah
guys,
Hughes.
yeah, Jeremiah Hughes, have multiple years left. So if they can start to turn a corner this year and you're bringing in more good talent as freshmen in this, next class, I'm starting to think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, even if they may not feel like they can see it right now.
Yeah, just to stay on PJ Woodland for a second, when we watched his tape, I mean, he was out of Mississippi, so, Texas players are a little bit easier, and Texas and Louisiana players a lot of times, for me and for us, since we're, like, over here, are a lot easier to get a read on, I think.
Hey, Mississippi 7A ball ain't no joke.
No, 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 it's not, but when you watch PJ Woodland's tape, it's like, this guy is a baller.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
for Blake Baker to say the competitiveness jumps off the screen at him, or not the screen, off the field at him, like, that's exactly what jumped off the screen at me when you watch his games, and you watch his film. Like, there was no question. I had him number 12 in my, rankings of the class, and, he was a very modest three-star guy, but, man, he's a dog, man. He really fights, and so to hear him at 5'11", 160, already pushing for first team reps, like, yes, it does speak to the uncertainty and the potential limitations of this LSU cornerback room, but at the same time, I mean, credit to him. We saw Ashton Stamp do this last year. Now PJ Woodland is doing it this year. He that type of competitiveness and that type of effort on a consistent basis and the ability to pick up things really quickly, I think that's what stood out to Blake Baker the most. So credit to PJ for stepping up and doing really well this spring.
Yeah, I've heard that Ashton Stamps, who everyone who is a member of the Bengal Tiger listens to the podcast knows him, been a massive fan of since he was at Rummel, but that he's been really improved this spring, which is what you would expect. Like he got tossed into the fire as a true freshman, had some ups and downs, played through injury, had offseason and surgery to clean it up. Now he's already back out there and sort of looks the part. And you'll get J.K. Johnson back this summer, an Ohio State transfer, and then hopefully at some point Zy. So
Yeah.
we don't know how these pieces at corner will all come together, but it's certainly a good thing when Stamps and Woodland and these other guys are having strong showings in the eyes of a guy like Blake Baker.
Yeah. I don't think he mentioned anybody else by name or was asked about anybody else by name really. He said Sage Ryan has forced a lot of turnovers. He's made a lot of plays, which
I
we
think it's
knew
easy
from.
to say that Sage has probably had the best spring of anyone on, or like maybe the most consistent. We hear his name and see him do things more often than anyone else.
Yes, I am hesitant to buy a lot more stock, but it's
Well,
good that he's making plays.
it's speaking to the reality that he's in his natural position. He was
Yes,
a cornerback last year when he's never played. He's a safety. That's what he is.
I agree.
So I think making these plays is a result
I
of being in his natural position.
For sure, for sure. I just don't know how high I wanna set my expectations. So that's what we're trying to gauge. I mean, that's the case for this entire defense, right? It's like, how
Sure.
high do I wanna set expectations for, like, Harold Perkins and, like, is he gonna be all SEC? Is he gonna be all American? Like, I don't know how high to set it.
Deshaun Womack, does he have a breakthrough
Exactly,
year out of, not
exactly.
nowhere, but second
Braden
year suddenly
Winston,
gets
yeah. So, that's gonna be, we'll see a lot more. We'll see the spring game coming up next Saturday, and then fall camp ultimately will be the telling time for us to get a good look at this team and see what they are. But um, yeah, I think we covered all our bases there. He said
Yeah, we'll talk
DJ.
more. We'll get another podcast rolling soon. We
Yeah,
just wanted to do one to react to Baker and Sloan, and both of
yeah,
them were very good. You can go watch them on YouTube, and they were solid.
yeah. Sloan said, Shay. He said, "What's your name again? What's your name again?" And
Failed to
Shay was like,
introduce myself, and he made me pay for it.
Shay Dixon on three. He's like, oh, okay, okay, yeah. So make sure you call him up and give him a hard time about that.
Mr. Sloan, sorry,
All right.
apologies.
Yeah, it's
All
a
right,
big
well, let's
deal
get
now.
out of here. We said 30 minutes. We did it successfully.
We did. I gotta go do a radio interview. So, yeah, thank you all for joining us. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe. If you haven't already subscribed or to the Bengal Tiger on 3, Shay, I think I just got a notification from our people that we have a promo. Let me read it. YouTube promo code that will give us 2 months for $1. Okay, so we have 2 months for $1. Code is. Did you not see this, Shay?
I'm looking at it right now. I can see it
It
now.
is LSU1. LSU1, 2 months for $1. There's our YouTube promo
The
code.
number one.
The number one. Sorry, LSU1,
And
and
that's
that'll get you
go
2
to
months.
On3 or go to the bengaltiger.com. 2 months for $1 is not a bad deal. Okay, so promo code LSU1, the
Here, let
number
me
one.
code LSU1. Wait, can I add the banner? Hold on.
There you
Sorry,
go.
I need a producer. There we go.
There you go.
LSU1, just like that. But yeah,
Join
2
the
months for
Bengal
$1.
Tiger.
Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll get you through, really through the spring ball season, and then really heat up in recruiting, football, basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, all that stuff, and we'll see if this baseball team turns it around. So, thank you all for joining us, and we will talk to y'all later.